I had breast cancer, it was kind of like a parade wherever I went. Like people would come up and be like, you can do this. You've got this. Like I was bald and people would just be like, yay. And when I had this, I found that people wouldn't look at me or they would stare. I didn't even want to answer my door because at one point I answered the door for a delivery person and they just stared at me and were like, what happened to your face? And so I didn't want to even go out by the end. I had very hippie parents. When I was a kid, we lived in a school bus in the panhandle of Florida with a well and an outhouse, like that kind of hippie. And as a little kid, I always wanted to be a performer. I remember when the teacher would go around the room, I'd be like, I want to model, was what I would say. But my mother always had art in the house. We always had supplies. And so that freedom to express ourselves in that way was, I didn't realize how extraordinary that was until I got older.
I grew up in India actually, until I finished high school. I wanted something transformative with people. I wanted a relationship. I wanted to build long-term value. I wanted to really be involved in people's lives, and that was extremely enjoyable to me to do. And so I knew, and my father is a physician, he just retired, and I grew and learned more about medicine. So I went and rotated with a whole bunch of people just to learn what it's about. And then I said, how do I put together technical stuff, artistic stuff, business stuff, relationship-based stuff together in medicine? And the only answer was plastic surgery, so that's how it really came about.
I remember as a kid always being amazed when I saw like kids theater, or when I would see actors. Every time I saw it, I could feel it bubbling inside of me that I wanted to do that. And it wasn't until I got into high school where we finally had access to a theater class. I wasn't very good, but I loved it. So I'd audition and I really wouldn't get any of the roles, but I kept showing up to it. And I went to college for theater, but tech theater. So backstage, scene painting and set construction and lighting. But all my electives were the acting classes. I'd sit backstage and sitting in the dark, and I'd watch these people perform on stage and I was so close to it. And then finally, I just couldn't not do it. And my husband was like, I'll support you for a year. Try it. And I ended up booking a movie with Tom Cruise, and I booked 2 TV shows. I ended up doing really well that first year. And I was like, all right, I'm in. And I was about 25, 26 when I made that transition. When I was 13, my mother got diagnosed with breast cancer. But I wasn't really aware of what was going on. When I was 22, I had graduated college, my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, where I'd take her to all of her chemo treatments and went through that with her. And when I turned 30, she passed away from ovarian cancer. And I found out that I had the genetic mutation for cancer, so I have the BRCA1 mutation. I had decided after my mom died that I was going to do a double mastectomy, preventatively. And I was in the process. I had already picked out my plastic surgeon. I had picked out my doctors. And I had my last MRI done. I was like, let me just do one more. Just, why not? And on that one, they found out they saw something. And I got the phone call saying that it was breast cancer. And they were like, do you need a doctor recommendation? I was like, I have an appointment next week. already with the surgeon. And I ended up doing a double mastectomy, a reconstruction, chemotherapy, radical hysterectomy, and I did a one-woman show while I was in the middle of that, playing cancer and using art to cope with it. And it took me several years to kind of heal from all of that, to grow my hair back, to feel stable again and healthy and energetic. And I was finally like, okay, I'm ready to get back. I'm ready to be an actor again. Let me do this. They did that first cutting and I'm sitting in the waiting room with the bandage on for them to look at the slides, and they call me back in again. They're like, we need to cut more. And I remember just being like, wait. They cut more, sent back out into the waiting room. They call me out a third time. And now I just start crying. And it was all day. They ended up going in 6 times. And they just, while I was awake, slowly just cut off half of my nose. And I remember like calling my agent while I was sitting there going, I'm not gonna be able to shoot next week because I have half a nose.
She essentially lost our entire hemi-nose, as you know, the right side of her nose. There was no tissue there at all. You could see right through. And so it was what we call a full thickness defect of the hemi-nose on the right side of her nose.
I went in for the beginning of the reconstruction process. I did not expect what that was going to be like. I had been through reconstruction with my breast, I had been through cancer, and this was so different.
I knew what had to be done is to rebuild all of those structures essentially of the nose, which needed the inner side of the nose to be built because the tissue inside is needed. We had to build the center support structure, which is the cartilage part of the nose that had to be built that gives it the support. Then to cover it up on the outside with skin. I borrowed some cartilage from her ear. I borrowed a little bit of tissue from her nose, and then I borrowed a lot of tissue from her forehead. And then I was able to bring her forehead tissue down.
We had finished the 4 surgeries, but it was still like knobby. It didn't look, you could still tell that something happened. And he asked me so humbly, where he was like, what don't you like about it? Because I was like, oh, it's fine, you did a great job. He was like, no, what don't you like? And I was like, well, this is a little thick up here, and this is a little... And so we repeatedly would meet every month or so, every few weeks, and he would numb the area and slowly started just chiseling away at it. And even to when, like, 'cause it's my scalp inside of my nose, so I can grow a ponytail out of my nose, like, and I remember telling him, like, I'm having a hard time breathing. There's so much hair in there. And I would cut it, but it was just like so awkward. And he was so lovely. He, for free, had them do electrolysis in my nose. Every month I'd go in and he was just like, we'll do it, don't worry about it. 6 months after, maybe 7 months after this happened, I booked The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel with like on camera right here. And you'd never know. It's amazing what a really incredible doctor can do. And now I'm able to act again and model. So from being a kid and being like, I want to be a model, I can still do that thanks to Dr. Kusuma.
If there is a person that makes an impression, it's Aniela. Taking that experience and passing it on, like she's trying to do now, and inspiring other patients, because I mean, to have the presence of mind, to have the perseverance and attitude adjustment, the hope that you keep, and having fun with it in a sense, and making something creative out of it is something that I think all patients will benefit from. I think this is, in my practice, one of the most remarkable stories.
I think that how my life has changed from working with Dr. Kusuma is mainly that it didn't. where if I hadn't worked with him, it would have. But because of him, it's as if it never happened. And that's a miracle in itself.